I can honestly say that I was born modest, but it wore off a long time ago. Joel's not here. I guess I was thinking I was going to prepare for this, and then I thought, well, I'm not going to waste the time. And all of a sudden my mind went blank. Of course, I can start on any story. Just for the people wondering, this area is near and dear to me. I've been through many times. It just so happens there was a close friend of mine by the name of, well, stage name was Petroleum Vesuvius Nasty. David Ross Locke was the editor of the Toledo Blade and a friend of mine. He toured, actually, he was one of Lincoln's favorite authors. And Nasby at one point, he tried to get me to come in, and I would do shows. I did shows up and down the river back in the day, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. But he said to me, he says, Sam, if you come to Toledo, Toledo is going to be the literary capital of the Midwest. If you come to Toledo, Ohio with me, we will make this the literary capital. Oh, he was going to give me part of the paper. He had all kinds of promises. We were going to tour. We were going to be famous. Juggernauts. We were going to show the world. And actually at the time, when it came, they called it the Lyceum. And it was without television, without radio, without anything. Entertainment was scarce. So what we would do in this group is we would speak. Nasby, Artemis Ward, there was a group, and we would go town to town. And it's interesting because you would buy a ticket, a year-long ticket, and they promised you things like me and Nasby and the other people, because we were on there. But son of a gun, unfortunately, none of them were lucky enough to actually get us, so they got someone else. Kind of reminds me of my brother when I worked for him in the newspaper. I'm going to digress. Or maybe I won't. The Lyceum was pretty interesting because on that, Nasby and I were actually the most popular. It's kind of even hard so many years later. Do you have my pen here? Maybe I can do something to them.
A little retribution, dear.
I think so. While we were just talking about, typically, my wife never joined me, especially when I wore the white suit. But I find out there's a lot of women in the crowd that are kind of interested in the woman behind the man, because the truth is that I don't think that you would ever heard of me if it wasn't for her. Everyone has this notion of who Mark Twain is, but Mark Twain was a fictional character invented by me on these books. But Samuel Clemens was a family man, a devoted husband. And I've actually...
Yeah, that's the other group.
When I started writing, we, instead of moving to Toledo, we had the misfortune, and I say that very sarcastically, to go to Hartford, Connecticut, which is a beautiful place. And I would write, and she was pretty heavy-handed in editing what I would write. And I can remember one day I had a particular, and she kind of had an objection with the use of certain words and expletives. And she let me know. And we never quarreled. So I kind of decided that I was going to maybe let her know that I think she was a bit heavy-handed. So I wrote this dissertation, and I used all of the common phrases of riverboat pilots and cowboys, butchers, scallywags in general. And she all of a sudden, instead of Xing things out, she started reading it word for word. words that I don't think ever came from her mouth. And she got done and she put it down and she says, well, how does that sound? And I said, well, to be honest with you, dear, I think that you pronounced all the words close. Your inflection might have been off. But I can tell right now, you've never practiced these words. Now, boys, remember when you were young, really young, and you started hearing your first curse words? What you would do is listen to it, and you'd go out back in the alley and practice. Because you didn't want to say it wrong, because that's what the adults said. We all wanted to be adults. So we practiced, and we got the context. And we honed our skill for those vulgarities. So that when we were around our peers, we could spew that out with great bravado. Accomplished. The problem is that my beautiful wife did not have that practice. And I told her that she should probably not say those words unless she properly prepares herself. So we both agreed at that time that that endeavor wasn't really worth it. You know, it's kind of interesting when I get started on it. I told you I was born in Florida, Missouri, moved to Hannibal, Missouri, which the books have talked about in length. On the banks of the Maumee River here, which is kind of a poor excuse for Mississippi. Where I grew up, as I'm looking down, I can look down there, and I can see, oh, maybe 100 yards of water. In Hannibal, Missouri, it was a mile of water. Why does that remind me of the story? I'm going to digress all over the place because I won't have my mind doesn't work. But anyway, I was in Nevada, and I decided, this was during the Civil War, I actually deserted both sides. I was in the Marion Rangers for the Confederacy, and I was in the riverboat service for the Union. And at one point, I led somewhat of an assault against this invasion of Missouri. It was a fellow by the name of Ulysses Grant. And I remember I came home to Hannibal. The neighborhood boys were talking about this. And we decided that this war of northern aggression, that we should do something. Because our governor told us, young men, you should go out and defend your state against northern aggression. So we popped open a bottle and we started thinking about northern aggression. We had a drink. And then we had another bottle, another drink. And by the time all of the alcohol was drank, we were sure. We had our courage screwed and we were going to go out and we were going to show that nasty Ulysses Grant what for. We thought at the time, well, there's 14 of us and only 10,000 of him. But we'll still, that's fair enough fight. Which was kind of funny, because while we were doing this thing, I wrote about it in the campaign that failed. While we were doing this thing, we were boys, young boys. He was a jeweler, son of a tanner. We didn't know what we were doing. Off across the countryside in Missouri, chasing. The farmers would come up and say, oh, you better, Ulysses is over that hill. What you want to do is flank him. That's the way you do that war stuff. Okay, flanking. What does flank mean? Well, flank means when you come in, not in front of them, but from the side. So we were kind of like, wait a minute, so flanking basically means that they're coming from that direction and you go that direction. We tried that. Worked quite well. So after 3-4 weeks, Missouri countryside. Now Missouri in the fall is a beautiful place. Like hell is beautiful. The rain will come at any given moment. The sleet will come at any given moment. It'll turn cold, hot. So as we went through the countryside, it rained the whole time. After a month of getting chased around, we finally came to this barn, Colonel Rawls' barn. We went up into the hay mound. I'm sitting there after, cold in the hay mountain. It just so happens I had a cigar, and I had one Lucifer. For those that don't know, that's a match. You see where they got that. So there I am in the corner, and I lit up my cigar, and I started puffing, but a part of the Lucifer fell off and started the hay on fire. So first thing I did was jump to get out of there. And I jumped out of the top of the hay mound down into a pile of rocks. It's wet, it's nasty. Put out my cigar. I was depressed. And then all of a sudden the fellas, they were up in the top of this hay mound, and they started looking for me. Sam, Sam, where are you? And they took this burning straw and they threw it out on top of my head. And at that point I said my military career had gone out in a blaze of glory. The other little story I'm going to get back with the river.
Well, I see him. I thought I read in the paper of Henry Meigs.
Well, the rumors of my death
It's
happened.
probably fake news.
What am I going to say on that? You know, that's not a new thing, you know. The lie wasn't just invented by Donald Trump.
How'd you know about Donald Trump?
Time travel.
Can you repeat that, please?
He asked how I knew about Donald Trump, and I said, I know everything. Whether it happened or not. Doesn't
I
matter.
removed my shoes.
Remember when I said I'm going to conserve the truth? So anyway, after that grand Civil War, I decided to go out to Nevada, and I started out. I was going to. Well, my brother actually was the secretary of the state before the governor, and I worked for him. And then I became a miner, and then the miner thing didn't work. Actually, I owned the Comstock load, and they had this pesky little law that if you file a claim, you got to actually go and dig. Well, we got this wonderful claim to this load, and what did we do? We went back home and bragged to our friends. So while we were bragging to our friends, someone came in and actually started digging. But, so I thought it was interesting. So there I was in Carson City, Nevada, I have this Carson River. I thought about the Mississippi River. I didn't think about the Maumee River. So I went down to the Carson River and I thought, river. And I proceeded to take, and I hopped over the darn thing. I hopped over a river. You've never done that. And I hopped over again. And I hopped over again and again and again. And I worked up a heck of a thirst, and then I knelt down and I drank it dry.
I want to check.
Wasn't long after that, I was actually up in Cairo. Now, you know where Cairo there is in Illinois, that's where the Ohio. That Ohio is the dang thing. Anyway, so I was in Cairo and I thought, I'm going to jump across the Mississippi River. I can jump across rivers. So I went down to the courthouse and I don't think I had the white suit on at the time, but I'll talk about the white suit later. And I commenced running as fast as I could. I mean, I'm a fast runner too. Anyway, I leapt into the air. And halfway across, I realized that I did not have the momentum to make it to the other side. So I had to turn around and run back.
You didn't make a splash?
No, I just ran back, and then I went to the bar and had a drink, and everything was okay. Just, that's kind of, you know, how you fix anything, isn't it? So, yeah. I actually was going to, I had a point to the story. But, am I the only one up here that's noticing it's warm today? Yeah. Yeah, I do. It's not that I'm so tearing up over my adventures. I was talking to some kids earlier, these people here, about America, which is an interesting thing. This country is an amazing country, and the fact that it's a melting pot. And when the whole thing started out, the Europeans came over, and when they came over, they brought all their European stuff with them. Germans brought beer, English brought literature. Then there was some diseases that they traded with each other. We won't get into that. But every country, every civilization, every society has traits, has characteristics, has art, literature, poetry. And at one point, all of these countries, bits and pieces started to melt. And it was just so happens about the same time I published Huckleberry Finn that people said, whoa, this truly is American. These characters are American. The writing style is American. Because, and I kind of think, and I know a lot of people want to criticize the Europeans for this, that, or the other society, but I love this country in so much as that we have stolen anything of any value from everyone and kept it as our own. And back to the metaphor of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. If you look at the characters of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, they're young, they're unsophisticated, they're wild, they're free. And if you look at America at the time, America was young, unsophisticated, wild, and free. We all had this notion that we're not going to listen to whatever, we're going to do things our way. And generations were inspired by these boys, this sense of independence, which was America. Now, we can argue today, is that same sense of independence here? Go ahead. Feel free. Feel free. If you do something interesting, I'll tell everyone. And if you don't, I'll lie. So it doesn't matter. Back to the thing. I'm going to conserve the truth. I mean, when it comes to my life, I'm going to start out. Some fella came up to me not long ago, and he said, "You do a great impersonation of Samuel Clemens." Well, contraire. I wrote a book called A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, where a Connecticut Yankee went back in time to King Arthur's court and decided to fix everything. And with that book, I had not only achieved a literary license, but at that point I had achieved a temporal license. Time itself is under my command. So with that temporal license, I was able to go places and times that you are restricted from. At one point, I actually was aboard the Starship Enterprise in the year 2060. Oh, well, it was way future. And I went back in time. So, when I said I was born in 1835, I was born when the comet was coming through the sky, Halley's Comet. And in 1910, Halley's Comet came through the sky again. And I saw fit not to die, but I reached a hold of that tail, and I went through the cosmos. I visited heaven, hell, civilization, strange creatures. In 1985, the comet was coming through again, and me and the comet decided to visit the Earth again. Now, why we did that, I don't know, but I'm stuck here for a while anyway. So I can say, to a degree, if time is relative. Is time relative?
Possibly. Depends if you're-
Sounds good. Well, there happens to be another guy with crazy hair like this and a mustache that says so.
Yeah.
So if a guy with crazy hair like this and a mustache says so, it's got to be true, right? Okay.
I'll buy that.
So we've established that if time is relative and that I'm no longer subject to the same rules as you, that, as a matter of fact, is as possible as the speed of light being a constant, I'm here. So therefore, and I think some things in this world of ours are universal and go forever. I think about the dream of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, the sense of freedom, the sense of wildness, the sense of independence. That is part of the American dream, and I pray that that dream will not die, that that dream will live, and that I myself will continue as the American spirit will continue. You didn't know I was all patriotic, did you?
I saw you at the American Adventure in Epcot. I know what you can do.
Okay. Was it one of those automaton things?
Yeah.
or- Okay. I was going to say I don't remember being there. but then again, I was talking to someone earlier today, and I've been places, and I have found out that there are impersonators out there.
Oh, okay.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I happen to be close friends with 27 Elvises. He was jealous of my white suit, but it doesn't dance quite as well. Oh, where do we want to go from here, dear?
I don't know. I always like morals and memories. The watermelon story. That's my favorite.
Okay,
You
that
have to tell
will
my
do that one.
favorite.
When I was a young boy in Hannibal, Missouri, I got up one summer morning and it was quite warm, and I stood, or sat actually, along the side of the road, and there was this farmer that came through town. He had a wagon full of watermelons. And he would stop house to house and he'd knock on the door and he'd say, "Man, we have fresh, cold watermelons." Now, how that could be cold because it was hot and it was in the sun, but he still said that. And he would go in and the lady would come out and he would take a couple. And he said, "These are the best watermelons in the entire county." Kind of reminds me when I was a boy. You know, I was the best boy in Hannibal, Missouri. I was the best boy in the country along the Mississippi River. The problem with that is no one else remembers it that way. So as the farmer was the best watermelon farmer in the entire world, he would go door to door and he would take his wares and he would sell them, and he would go to the next, and I'm looking at these watermelons. I said they were cold. I was listening to him. I was salivating, as a matter of fact. And all of a sudden, he went into this lady's house, armful of watermelons, and I decided that on that, I saw one of the watermelons in particular. And I thought to myself, I'm going to go down and I'm going to take that watermelon. I thought, no, that's not, I shouldn't take a watermelon. And I went down and I said, maybe what I should do is go down and liberate that watermelon. That sounds noble and fair and courageous. So I did. I went down to that cart and I liberated that watermelon. I took it over to the sawmill, the lumber yard, and I took and I cracked it open, and it was green. Green. Didn't I just hear this fellow say that he had the best watermelon in the entire country in Missouri, and they were cold, and this was not cold, and it was green. And I didn't know what to do, and I started to think, well, what should I do? What should I do? Oh, forget it. I thought the only fair thing to do was restitution. That's a highfalutin word, isn't it? Restitution. So I picked up the pieces of watermelon, I went back, and I put them on this guy's cart. Right like they were. And all of a sudden the farmer comes out, and he started to open his mouth. And I knew that whatever came out, I didn't want to hear. So I decided to preempt his discussion. And I said, "Sir, this watermelon was on your cart. It is green and it is warm and it is tasteless. how could you possibly tell everyone in town that you are the best watermelon salesman and you had a defective product like this? Aren't you ashamed? Well, he kind of thought for a second about it, saw that it was green, and everything. He said, well, I don't let me provide you with the best watermelon in the entire county. And he promptly went over and he said, here, he grabbed it, and he said, here, young man, here's your watermelon. I thought, well, this is wonderful. And I went over to the lumber yard and I cracked it open, and it was it was cold, and it had no seeds, and it was dripping with nectar from the gods. I've often said the angels eat watermelon. Oh my God. And I'm sitting there and I'm eating this watermelon. And I thought to myself, you know, this farmer was headed down the path of depravity. This farmer was headed to hell for lying. This farmer was on the slippery slope of the abyss. And I saved him. And all I got for my efforts was a damn watermelon. That's how I want to remember the story.
I think we ought to get Donald Trump a watermelon.
I can think a lot of people would like to do with a watermelon. I know some people say, well, how could you wouldn't know. Wait a minute. I'm here. I'd have to know just about everything you know, don't I? Except for you had breakfast and And this isn't Pancho Villa. He was supposed to be here.
Yeah, he was a no-show.
Okay. Is there anyone have any questions you want to take this entertainment a different direction?
Can you tell us about your white
Entertainment? I thought
attire?
this was a serious lecture.
When did the word serious in me? Remember at the beginning, I'm going to conserve the truth. Now the lady down here asked about the white suit. Gentlemen in the South always wore white linen, which you see right here. Nice linen suit. But it was like 1906. I was reading the New York Times, and it said that wearing white after Labor Day is absolutely a fashion faux pas. That only the most barbaric and uncivilized people would wear white after. I thought about this. I thought about barbarianism and wars and man's inhumanity to man and starvation and I thought to myself, wait a minute, I think we're getting a little bit off key, that wearing a white suit is nothing that is going to impede mankind's progression. So I proceeded to go upstairs and I got my white linen suit on. And I went down, walked on New York City, and I'd go in front of the churches. As the people were coming out, I'd wave, and everyone would go, there's Mark Twain! I thought that was fun. I'm parading around after Labor Day in a white suit. And I kept this up. I thought it was really funny because all the people... Now, if you have to put things in context, at the time, I was the most recognizable figure in the country. Prior to that, when I printed Grant's memoirs, him and I were together, lionized and revered by America. So anyway, as the season went on after Labor Day, what I would do is go out in crowds of people, making a big fuss out of myself. Well, as it went on, as you know, after Labor Day, things start getting cold. What I found out is keeping this hijinks going, wearing a linen suit was rather uncomfortable. So I actually went to my tailor and I said, I would like a white wool suit. And he said, oh, we can't make a white wool suit. No. I want a white wool suit. He said, but we can make this suit out of cashmere. And I said, well, what's the difference between cashmere and wool? He said, about $100.
You beat me to it.
It is his show.
If you want to finish, feel free.
No, I'm not going to.
You probably do a better job.
Sir. I was silent. I was waiting for you to get the
I was going to say, you could probably do a little bit better job. Why'd you make me disappear, Ron? There's probably a lot of people that like that about now. So I actually got a cashmere suit and a white suit, which was kind of interesting because there was no such thing as a white tuxedo at the time. Who needed them? They were black tuxedos. Except no one needed a wool thing. So I got that, and then I thought that this was funny. So what I did, even though we're only talking a few years, if I would wear the suit that I normally wore, which was gray, and I tried it before, people go, "What's wrong with your clothes? Your washing machine doesn't work or what? Those Chinese launderers don't do a good job." So it was, like I said, it lasted, but it's rather interesting that everyone associates me with a white suit. And then another little interesting thing, the caveat of history. There's a fellow by the name of Hal Holbrook. Hal Holbrook's a good actor. Hal Holbrook is kind of interesting, and I had a person come up to me and say, "My nephew was sued by Hal Holbrook for doing Mark Twain." That prompted investigation. So I found out that Hal Holbrook actually wrote all of his material originally and copyrighted it so that someone wouldn't steal his act and simply repeat it verbatim. His acting skills, his writing skills, he's a consummate actor. He's done very good. But the interesting thing is that people now equate, because he's been doing it for the last 60 years and doing it quite well, people equate Hal Holbrook, which completely rewrote the copyright. But that's what sells. That's what people know, and that's what people believe. You know, back to the thing is that, you know, you can't really let facts interfere with a good story. And I've actually been here around this area when Hal Holbrook's been in town, and they said, you know, it's like, you know, Hal Holbrook's doing you, and I said, I think he's doing a good job too. When you think about it, how he could take this fiction, this narrative, and own it. So how do you compete against someone with that much talent?
Because he used that verbatim.
Hey, verbatim?
Yeah, that if he'd have stayed away from the verbatim business and left it in the bottle someplace, he wouldn't have been in trouble.
Well, I have you know, messed around with that bottle of verbatim myself. And Rodney happens to be the king of verbatim.
I had to give it up.
Really?
Yeah.
For Lent.
No, nobody would lend me any more at all.
Oh, that's probably why. Desperation to bring an act. So is there any other questions? If not, you are all free to leave. Thank you very much.
You truly are a time traveler, sir. You say hello to Tesla for me, would you?
I haven't seen him for a while.